Hey guys, it's Josh here with XBNPC. So this is my first video, so I hope you guys can bear with me, but if it sucks, just let me know and I'll work on it. But getting into today's topic, dynamic settings. Are they a good thing for console games? Should we use them? And if we should use them, what do we expect and what do we deserve from that concession basically to our visuals? Alright, so just for a second I want to talk about dynamic resolution. Dynamic resolution is a feature to some, and it is an eyesore and it's a consolation feature to others, much like chromatic aberration is. If you ask some people, they don't want it. It's not a feature to them, it's a disturbance. However, where chromatic aberration, I'll be honest with you, I'm not sure if it provides any kind of performance penalty or incentive to run, but I know that dynamic resolution is going to have a positive impact on performance if there is a need for it, which if you look at any console title, very, very, very few are going to run at a consistent 1080p and a locked 60 frames per second with the frame times being consistent. Forza Motorsport 5, Forza Motorsport 6, those are the only two that I can even name. If there are others, I'm not sure. Maybe they're sports titles or something, or possibly some arcade games, some indie games, something like that. But as far as a AAA exclusive title goes, it's doing a lot of things on screen at the same time, typically with AI and effects. 1080p 60 is a very hard target to hit on consoles. It's a hard target to hit on PC. With that being said, I think that dynamic settings in general, dynamic resolution, absolutely, are a fantastic idea. I think they should be implemented in every graphic engine that's able to support that. On PC, players like myself are able to go in and change various graphic options in the game. Now, some of those options you are able to change without having to restart the entire game engine. So, things like anti-aliasing, typically things like post-processing or ambient occlusion, those type of things, depending on the engine, sometimes you're able to go in there and you're able to make changes to those types of things, sometimes shadowing, rarely textures, but certain settings you can change, and you can hop back into the game and you will see a difference in visuals depending on what you changed, but also in performance immediately. Now, dynamic settings like dynamic resolution, they do basically they do these changes on the fly to maintain performance, and you can sacrifice visual quality, I would imagine, in any number of different areas, whether it be shadow resolution or again anti-aliasing, actual frame buffer resolution. What is the native resolution being rendered at? That's exactly what dynamic resolution is changing, and it's almost invisible to the naked eye. As far as I can tell, with titles like Halo 5, maintaining a consistent 60 frames per second is absolutely critical, and it does that very, very well using dynamic resolution. These, again, types of dynamic settings such as dynamic resolution, I think should be implemented on a regular basis, at least with console titles. You have a set piece of hardware, and software, unfortunately, is not as fixed. You have certain scenarios in a game where you may have a large number of AI characters on screen at the same time, higher polygon counts, increase in transparency effects, etc., etc., that are going to put a larger strain on different components of your system. Whether that be GPU, CPU, your bus speed, pulling data off of the hard drive, or whatever the bottleneck may be, but giving the software, I don't want to say an out, but giving it an opportunity to perform consistently using dynamic settings, in my personal opinion, that is an absolutely phenomenal idea that I think developers should be implementing on a regular basis. Unfortunately, I think a lot of developers are scared to implement those types of settings, even to maintain performance, where it otherwise, typically can be lacking in console games, going even below 30 frames a second, sometimes dipping down into the teens. But I think that their vanity isn't necessarily in the way. I think it is their perception of consumer perception of what those things mean. So what I mean by that is, I think developers have heard all this bitching and crying and moaning over resolution, 1080p, 900p, 60 frames a second, 30 frames a second, screen tearing, VSync, customer, consumers hear all these different buzzwords. A lot of them, may or may not realize the impact it has to visual fidelity on the screen, or be able to tell at all. So with that being said, though, I think that developers are kind of painted into a corner about, giving customers these flat resolutions. And the other things, the other dynamic settings I'm talking about, which would be making dynamic settings for things like shadowing, anti-aliasing, other settings that PC gamers have been able to change for years on the fly. I don't know why, from a developer standpoint, there would be any reason they wouldn't be able to implement a similar dynamic process for these various settings that will impact performance, and again, yes, visual quality, but depending on what the setting is, and how you can make up for that in other areas, you may not even notice. The general consumer more than likely would not notice, and certainly with a frame rate that is unwavering, 60 frames a second, getting the maximum refresh out of most standard TVs, that is something where the average consumer at the end of the day, they will notice that experience being much better, because the consistency of your experience is there. Whereas if you have frame drops, it's not, you're getting frame hitching, you're getting screen tearing. Maybe a guy comes in to kill you in a multiplayer game and you have the screen where it tears, you have a frame hiccup, and then you die, and that is not a pleasant experience. A pleasant experience is having 60 frames a second, and every, whatever it is, 0.10, of a second, or obviously less if there's 30 of them, but you get the idea, you're getting a new frame. So if that guy comes in on you, you can clearly see him coming in. There's not a period where he's there and then he's not, all of a sudden he pops in your face because the frame's dropped. You can see him the entire way. You shoot him in the head, the guy dies. That is a phenomenal gaming experience. That's the way it's intended and the way it should be. And I don't think that sacrificing things dynamically when necessary and then boosting them when you're able to is such a bad idea. I think that consumer perception has made these things impossible for developers, but I think that consumers, as well as developers, just gamers, are entitled to have a consistent, smooth experience, and I believe that dynamic settings are the best way to do that. If I'm wrong, let me know I'm wrong. If it can't be done, I'd like to know why these other settings cannot be dynamic. If you guys know, if you have any input, please let me know. What are your thoughts? Is it frame rate over everything? Is it resolution? Frame rate be damned. Give me under the 20s. With my frames per second, but have it look as best as possible. Which I can respect that. That's one opinion. A lot of PC gamers, spend a lot of money trying to get the best visuals that they can. So I can certainly understand that. And I am a PC gamer as well, obviously, and I like to crank it up there as well and have it look as best as possible. But I got to tell you, for a console experience, I sure do like 60 frames a second. So let me know what you guys think. It's been real. I'll see you next time. See you.